But it's, and that tool would have been much better than me trying to do it with my teeth. But anyway, tools of recovery are important. And, it's good for us to have a toolbox full of tools. I don't think we're going to have too many. So I really was going to kind of combine alcoholism and eating disorders. Now, with eating disorders, there are different tools that we must have, and then there's some basic tools. I know years ago when I was at a drug alcohol treatment center in town, and I've probably told you this story. I probably don't have a story that you haven't heard. I'm a storyteller. But anyway, the First Baptist Church would let us take our clients over there. They had a family a rec center, and they would let them come over there and exercise and all. And so anyway, I'd take them over there every morning or several mornings a week. And the man that worked behind the desk was a paraplegic. He was in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. He was a Vietnam vet, and he worked there at the church. And so most mornings I just kind of shoot the breeze with him. We would visit. And so he asked me one day, he said, well, I keep seeing these guys, because we treated more at that time, mostly men. He said, I see these guys coming in and, they get really gung-ho, they do really good for a while, and then all of a sudden I don't see them for several months, and then they come back, and he said, what happens to them? And I said, well, it's called relapse. And he said, well, what do they have to do to recover? And I said, well, 5 simple things. 5 simple things. And the main thing is for an addict of any sort, to get up of a morning, and I recommend on the knees. It's, God hears prayers regardless of where you are, but to invite God into your day and ask for another day of recovery. Just invite God into your recovery. And then you get up off your knees and then you go to work. And the next thing is the work is read some kind of program literature, like the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And get a meditation book. I've got Courage to Heal here for Al-Anon, and then I've got one for OA. Every addiction has a specific meditation book. So do some form of meditation. And so I was telling him that. I said, it doesn't have to be real long, but just some form of meditation. And then the third thing is to work the steps with a sponsor. This program, the 12-step program, is not a do-it-yourself program. It's designed to do it with at least one other human being. It's designed for us to recover in a group. And so that third thing is have a sponsor and work the 12 steps with the sponsor. Like I said, it's not a help yourself program. It's not about working those steps by yourself. It's about having a guide to walk you through the steps and to not hurry them there. Just kind of be willing to take direction from someone else. So that's number 3, work the steps with the sponsor. So it stands to reason you're going to have a sponsor in order to work the steps with them. And then the fourth thing is to go to meetings, get with like kind. It's important for us to be around other people that have the same disease that we have, because you try to talk to, I know early on in my recovery, I would go to open AA meetings, a small open AA meeting in town, and I would try to talk about my food addiction, or I did one time, only one time. And of course, they shut me down, which was appropriate, And at that particular meeting, they always had a big basket of candy, little candy bars. And one of the guys just pushed that basket over to me, and he said, "Here, have a candy bar. That'll help you." And so it wasn't appropriate for me to talk about my eating disorder in an AA meeting. So it's important to get with like kind. Get with people, if it's a family member. I mean, if you're a family member, go to Al-Anon. Go to Al-Anon, that is for families and friends of alcoholics. And then I tell families also to go to open AA meetings, because that's when you're going to really learn about the disease. So then the fifth thing, and I was telling this to this gentleman, and I said the fifth thing that they must do, you can't keep it if you don't give it away. So the fifth thing is to pass it on, work with others, either sponsor others, and, when you sponsor someone, it's not like you're their boss. When you sponsor someone, I've always said, if you want to get rid of someone out of your life, tell them, either loan them money or tell them you'll sponsor them and you'll never hear from them again. A lot of times people they want to sponsor and then they get busy, or they're maybe not ready at that time, and they don't pick up, that phone is like, weighs a ton sometimes, and so it's hard sometimes to pick up the phone. But sponsorship is a big deal in a 12-step program. So it is about, good morning, Christine. It's about giving it away. You cannot keep the program if you don't give it away. So, and then the other fifth thing is thank God at night before you go to bed. Just thank Him at night. So you wake up in the morning, you invite God into the day, you read some program literature, you work the steps. You work the steps really the first time in an addiction, and then you begin to live the 12 steps. Some people will take an inventory every 6 months, or they will take another inventory maybe once a year. But it's about, you do the steps, and then step 10 is really doing the first 9 steps over every single solitary day. So that's how we learn to live the program, is doing those steps, but they must be done with another person. So invite God into your day, prayer and meditation, work the steps with the sponsor, go to meetings, and give it away. That's the 5 things that I told that man. And he was sitting there and he said, "You mean that's all they have to do to recover?" I said, "Yeah, that is it. I've never seen it fail. I have never yet." We'd get guys back there in detox where they would relapse, and I'd go back in detox after, give them a day or two, and I'd go back and ask them, what happened, and I've never, ever heard them say, "Well, I was calling my sponsor every day. I was going to meetings. I was working the steps." I've never heard them say that. Never, ever. What I would hear them say is, "Well, I did go to meetings for a while, but then I had been out of work for so long, I had to go to work. I had to make a living. And then I've been away from my family so long that I felt like I needed to be around the house more with my wife and kids." And, they would have them a real, they could justify their drunk. But what would happen, they would quit treating the disease. They would quit doing what we recommended them to do. And if you don't treat any disease on a daily basis, you're going to relapse. There is no getting around it. You're going to relapse. And what I would always say is, when people relapse, and this is what I say, this is what I believe. When people relapse, I don't know that they have fully taken step one. I don't know that they have fully accepted, in step one of the 12 steps, it says we admit it. I could admit till hell freezes over that I had an eating disorder, and that I was codependent, and that I was alcoholic. I could admit it. You can say it out loud. But until you work the steps and get to step 3, and 4, 5, 6, all the way down, there's no acceptance. You've got to get to the point of accepting, I have this deal. I have it. I have a disease. It is chronic. It's progressive. And it will kill me if I don't treat it. So my take on that, until people do a thorough first step in really, in what I've, and I still sponsor a few people, but what I have them to do is to write a whole history of their addiction, to write it from the very beginning. And when you do that, you're going to come out. I mean, I've never seen anybody be able to tell their story in 3 or 4 pages. It's usually 15, 18, 20 pages. It's a long deal, depending on how long they have been in the disease. And so, so talking about the tools this morning is, one of the things that I recommend is spend time on the first step, and that do a good inventory. Make sure, because see, no professional, I mean, we're qualified. I notice Kim's on here, Karen's on here. There's good therapists, there's good addiction therapists around. You've got a retired one right there, Neil. There are good, I mean, Jeff has been around the block a lot. So there are people, that we do have the credentials and the initials behind our names that we could diagnose an addict. We could diagnose someone with an eating disorder. But it does not matter what we say. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you say that you have, because that's all you're going to treat. If you don't own it, if you don't admit it, and then get to working the steps and really write a thorough first step, and that is writing a history of your disease. That is a tool. Write a complete history of it. Go back to your early days, way before it started, and see what your life was like and how you got into the disease. And so, because if you don't know what the problem is, you'll never find a solution. The solution, this is kind of a tongue twister, so listen. The solution to any problem is as powerful as the knowledge of the problem. You got it? The solution to any problem is as powerful as the knowledge of the problem. So if you don't know what your problem is, how in the world will you ever know when you found a solution? So, and you have to be, that first step is about powerlessness. And when I see people that are chronic relapsers, they have really never hit that point of complete powerlessness. Because when we hit that, it's like, oh God, I can't do it anymore. Please help me. And so the solution is, the problem is, if you want to know what the problem is in any addiction, you go look in the mirror. and say, "Good morning, problem." We are the center of our problem. And you might not like that. You might rather for it to be your mother. I mean, mothers get it from all sides. If it's not one thing, it's your mother. Mothers get blamed. It's real easy to blame mothers. Well, if mother hadn't done this, I wouldn't have had to drink. If mother hadn't done that, I would, I used to buy shoes because I wore a size 7. And then as I gained weight, a size 7 wouldn't fit, but I would not buy a larger size. And so I remember sitting in a shoe store and I had ingrown toenails. And I remember telling a shoe salesman that the reason I had those ingrown toenails is that my mother was an alcoholic and she wouldn't take me shopping to buy bigger shoes. Well, hell, I was a grown-ass woman, excuse my language. I was grown then. And I still wasn't buying shoes big enough because I didn't want to go past a size 7. So you got to get honest with yourself. So anyway, step 1, if you don't figure out what your problem is, you will never find a solution to it. So that powerlessness, you got to reach the stage of powerlessness. And I will tell you, addictions of any sort start up here in the penthouse. Visualize the penthouse. It's beautiful. Have you ever been to a big hotel or somewhere and had the privilege of visiting someone in the penthouse or got to stay in the penthouse? I mean, they were fine rooms. So the disease starts in the penthouse up here, where, you're not very bad. You're just kind of using a substance. And then it goes down and down and down. It's like an elevator going down. You can get off at any floor. And a lot of people do. A lot of people have enough of it. They get sick enough and they have enough and they get off maybe halfway down this staircase. They surrender and say, "I can't do this anymore." A lot of people take it to the basement. And those are usually the people that come to see us or have been living in the basement of addiction. They're kind of low bottom. And that's not a bad place to be, because when you reach that place, and I remember reaching it, I mean, with my eating disorder, I'd been sick. I was talking to my daughters the other day, good gosh, I was sick from age 4 with an eating disorder. And it got worse and worse and worse. And by age 15, I weighed like 250 pounds, and it just kept going and going and going. And I wanted help. I did want help. But, what I wanted help with was to lose the weight. I didn't know I had a disease. So back to step 1, you must absolutely do a good inventory and see if you have the disease. And how you know is if you are powerless, if by your own, own left alone, can you quit a disease on your own? Some of you, and I know some of you, and you've had different forms of cancer, or you have had some bad diseases. Could you quit that disease on your own? You don't just quit a disease. It has to be treated. And what I always say, if you're going to have a disease, let it be addictions or eating disorders, because what happens when you find recovery, you have done the suffering. The bulk of the suffering happens before you ever make a declaration to recover. Once you decide to recover and you start on day 1 doing what someone else tells you to do, like a sponsor or a therapist, you start following directions, you start following directions out of this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to start getting better. And you're going to get better every day. You won't have, every day won't be, the best days, but every day in recovery, you're going to get better. And so your best days are ahead of you. Where people that have some diseases, they may go into remission, but more than likely that disease is going to eventually kill them. And the good news about addiction, you do not have to die of addiction. You can be the worst alcoholic in town, but you can declare yourself an alcoholic and you can get on the road to recovery, and you never have to experience the disease of alcoholism again. You never have to wake up drunk. You never have to wake up on the floor of a jail ever again. Same with eating disorders. If you're a 90-pound or 70-pound anorexic or a 60-pound anorexic, once you make a decision that you want to recover, and that is, step 3, once you make a decision, you're going to get better. There is no way that you're not going to get better, whether you have anorexia or bulimia or compulsive overeating. You follow some simple directions, I'll tell you folks, you're going to get better. So versus a disease, like cancer or like diabetes. Now, diabetes is very, very, very treatable. You never have to have an episode of diabetes again if you follow some directions, because diabetes is really parallel with an eating disorder. So what I'm saying is, if you want to recover, do the deal. We used to have a guy in the meeting I used to go to, and he was a little challenged, but he would say things like, if you want to get the get, you got to do the do. If you want to get the get, you got to do the do. So that's what, recovery is. If you want to get better, you have to do some simple things. So the tool is, one thing, diagnose yourself. No one can diagnose you but you. You've got to make a decision. I've got this deal. And once you have it, then you start treating it. And one of the things that tools to treat it is, like I said, go to meetings, get a sponsor, declare yourself out loud that you have an addiction, hear yourself say it among other people that have the same disease that you have. And then one of the best tools is pen to paper. If you want to really learn about yourself, write. One of the things that I was encouraged to do early on, and that was to write my prayers to God. And at first I was so mad at God because, my mother was an alcoholic, and then I got married, and I didn't know I was marrying an alcoholic, and I did, and here I, ate myself up to almost 300 pounds, and I was overweight, and I was miserable, and I was angry, and I was rageful, and I was mad at God. He was on my list of people to be mad at. So my sponsor said, write a letter to God. And those first letters were, I hate you, put it down on paper. Get you a spiral notebook, a big, thick spiral notebook, and write every morning, write a prayer to God. And it doesn't have to be no flowery prayer. He knows your heart. If you're mad at him, he can take it. Put it down. Write a letter to God. I've got, and I'm going to go through them one of these days, I've got stacks and boxes of spiral notebooks in my closets that where I wrote prayers to God every morning. And so, pen to paper. Write. And then another thing is the first thing is get sober around whatever addiction. I mean, if you're not sober, these tools are not going to mean anything to you. They're just going to be words that I'm spitting out here. they're not going to mean a thing to you if you don't get sober. And that means if you are an alcoholic, that means not using any mind-altering chemical. I always get kind of amazed at people, and they'll declare themselves an I'm in recovery from alcoholism, and then they smoke dope. Alcohol is but a drug. That's all alcohol is. It's a drug. A drug is a drug is a drug. And if you are an alcoholic, you're addicted to a drug, the drug alcohol. And then you might be addicted to marijuana. They say it's not addicted, but the process is. It's a psychological addiction. You try to take someone's marijuana away from them, and then let's see how addictive it is. So if an alcoholic is using any kind of mind-altering chemical, their brain, and I love Kim, really, my daughter Kim, really is the one that brought this home to me. As long as you're using any substance, your brain is not sober. Your brain is not sober. Anyway, so get cleaned up, get clean. And then if you're an alcoholic or have a drug addiction, when you get clean of alcohol and drugs, if you don't work a good program, the first thing usually people get into is food. I've seen it over and over and over in Alcoholics Anonymous, is they'll switch over to food. Food basically does the same on the inside for a person as alcohol does. What alcohol does, alcohol is nobody's upper. It's a downer drug. You take the drug alcohol, you bring it in, you swallow it, and it gives you that sense of ease and comfort. And it lasts about 18 minutes. It will just ease that pain for a few minutes, and it'll give you a little high, it'll give you a little kick. But all of that lasts about 18 minutes. That's the same with food. Food, particularly if it's high carbs, sugar, chips, all of that stuff, it'll give you a kick. It'll, kind of, particularly sugar. Alcohol is made up mostly of sugar. So the compulsive overeater can take in massive amounts of sugar, and it will change the way you feel. It does the same thing that alcohol does. It gives you that sense of ease and comfort. But the minute you come to your senses, you get up in your brain, you feel guilty, you feel shame, and then instead of doing something about it, what do? We take more of a drug. We reach out to more because now we've upset ourselves, so we need something to ease that pain. So anyway, number one thing, if you don't get sober around the addiction, none of the things that I'm saying to you will really make that much difference. And Overeaters Anonymous, and I love OA, I do. And they don't talk about it as much, I don't believe, but used to. And it's whatever works for a person. Anyway, I do have my opinion. But they would have allow morbidly obese people lead meetings and be a speaker and all of that. It would be like a drunk alcoholic up doing the same thing. If you're not sober around the food, and I've worked with a bunch, and they'll work the steps, but they miss step one. They never get sober around the food. So what we call that is being sick, sober. In AA and OA, it's called fat serenity. People can work the steps and just get so serene and be so close to God, and while eating, eating massive amounts of food. This is a disease, folks, and you've got to deal with the substance first before you can use any other tool. That's my belief. If you can find a way to do it different, get after it. But it never worked for me. I've tried it a lot. there's a Food Addicts Anonymous, and I went to one up in Boston. I spent several weeks up there and went to Food Addicts Anonymous, and it's set up like AA. If you're not abstinent, and when you go to a Food Addicts Anonymous meeting, you don't talk. Like if you go to an AA meeting, they recommend that you don't drink before you go. I mean, they'll kind of tolerate you, but they'll usually take you out in the lobby and, pacify you or get you somewhere to detox. But they're not going to let you be a part of the meeting sitting there because a drunk alcoholic will want to take over the meeting, And so that's the same way with the food. You've got to get sober around the food. If you're starving yourself to death, get sober around the food. Start feeding yourself appropriate. If you're binging your guts out and then throwing the food up, get sober around the food. Now, those two diseases, you can go to OA and get really good recovery from compulsive overeating. What I recommend with anorexics and bulimics, you get you some professional help ASAP, and then couple it with lifetime attendance at OA. But you're going to have to stop and get sober around whatever addiction that you're doing first. And those, a chronic alcoholic a lot of times needs treatment. They need professional help. And the big book talks about that. Don't shy away from professional help if you need it. Eating disorder people need professional help too. Well, I'm not going to leave anyone out because this is a disease that is so damnable. If you don't treat it, it will kill you. Okay, so what we use food and alcohol for is to cope with trauma, with stress, and shame. And it's also thrives in secrecy and denial, and we carry the shame. If we're not carrying the shame, usually when you're carrying shame, it's someone else's shame that was put on you. This is why you need, when you get sober, these figures are going to begin to come up. And this is when you've got to look at that where you might really need some professional help, because the feelings, if you have some unresolved sex addiction, any form of trauma, when you get sober, it's going to create an opening for those feelings to come up. And if you don't treat that, you may not go back to the substance that if you're an alcoholic, you may not go back to alcohol, but you will find some addiction to ease the pain. And most of the time, it's going back to the primary addiction. Okay, so what I'm saying is diagnose yourself, get sober around the food, go to meetings, get a sponsor. Now, all the people on this program that might be listening, there's some of you who don't believe in this 12-step program. That's all right. You can recover without it. I don't know why you'd put yourself through that, but if you want to not recover with the 12-step program, there are other groups. I believe it's best treated within a group. And so, go into your city or wherever you live and find a group that is more conducive for you, if you don't like the 12-step program. A lot of religious people do not like to hear about the higher power. Well, get off of it. That was put in there because a lot of alcoholics come to the program so mad at God. If they said, put God in there right off and tried to force feed them God, they'd run out the front door. Now, I will tell you, later on, I've never seen an addict yet that didn't transfer a higher power to the God of their understanding. So, anyway, get with, if a 12-step program doesn't work for you, find some form of group to go to that is in recovery, and particularly that doesn't use the substance. And there are 12-step groups for every addiction that you might think of, and we heal more within the community. What happens a lot of times, we get wounded in isolation. The woundedness, when you're eating yourself to death or drinking yourself to death, when it has progressed that far, you're usually not doing it in front of people. You might be a big partier and go out and have fun, kick up your heels and all, but when you turn that corner or you cross that line into true addiction, usually that's when the lonely walk starts. You usually hide it, and that's for food addiction as well as alcoholism and drug addiction. It is a lonely disease. And, because my little husband, when I weighed almost 300 pounds, my little husband would say things like, well, I don't know why Tennie's overweight, because she hardly eats anything. Well, duh, not in front of him. But I would eat equal to, we were feeding 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people at a time. I would eat as much as it would take for my family. I was a volume eater. He didn't buy the groceries, he just complained about the money I spent. But I ate so much of the food up for my family that that was before 24 hours, grocery stores stayed open 24 hours. I could hardly wait until daylight where I could go get stuff for my kids' lunches, because I would have eaten it all up the night before. We are not trustworthy people. Do not trust us with food or when we're in the disease, or drugs and alcohol. If you've got some kind of fancy champagne around and an alcoholic's there, you better hide that bottle, because they're going to get into it. They will if they're desperate enough. Okay, so it is a twofold disease, and it's a physical disease, and I've talked a lot about the physical, but it has a mental and emotional side. And the main problem lies in that mental and emotional side. If you're overweight and it's just about the weight, go down the road to Weight Watchers. They have a good program. You can lose the weight. I see people, there's a comedian on TV, I can't remember, Leanne Morgan. She does this whole stand-up thing about Weight Watchers, that she's so glad that they don't limit the membership, that it's you can just keep rejoining. And she makes that real funny and all of that. And I'll watch, she's got one daughter that's morbidly obese, and that she talks about and makes a joke about all of them are just big people. They're just big farming people. So Weight Watchers will work. It'll get the weight off of you if you follow their program. But if you don't treat the mental and emotional side, you will gain it back. That's been proven over and over again. And so that mental and emotional side is, it's about feelings. It is about feelings. And one of the things is that we would really recommend people to do is to write down your triggers. What triggers you into the next binge? What triggers you into going and getting that first drink? Because you don't just fall into addiction. You don't just fall into relapse. It's a process. And what is happening to lead up to that? So look at your triggers, what your triggers are. And then some need to do, and I think everyone needs to do some inner child work. Because a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times people who have any form of addiction have trauma, have had unresolved trauma in their life. And so in sobriety, not right off the get-go, but unless you're in a program where there is professionals working with you, don't try to do much of a deep dive into the trauma work without a good therapist or without being an inpatient or in an intensive or something. You must do that with and don't hesitate to get professional help. Some need more help than the 12 steps. So this is one of the, I've been kind of skipping around here, but one of the things that is so important is spiritual. This is a spiritual problem. If you have an eating disorder, or if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, that is a spiritual spiritual problem. In that, you begin to worship. They begin to be the God of your understanding. Whatever you are used to ease the pain of living becomes the God of your understanding. Who else would go out in the dead of night with a snowstorm and go look for a drink? Who in their right mind would do that? Alcoholics are not in their right mind when they have to have a drink, and they'll go to any lengths to get it. And that's the same with us, with eating disorders. So it's a spiritual problem, and I'm not saying religious. If you're in a church, what the big book says is continue to go or go back to your church. If you were raised in a church and you quit going, you might want to get back into it. But don't go there expecting that's where you're going to get your healing. Now you might, I don't know, but if you had a broke leg, you would not go to the church to get the elders to set your leg. You would go to the ER. And that's what a 12-step program is. It's for emergencies. It is for those folks like us that can't stop on our own. And so you may find some healing in church. But the main, what I've seen is people heal. If you don't talk to someone that understands your disease, they don't understand. They will just say, well, why don't you just quit eating? What's the big deal? Or push yourself away from the table. Put your fork down. Or why would you have to have that alcohol? Why? There's no answer to why when it comes to addiction. It is about addiction. We have to have it. So prayer and meditation is important. That's the spiritual. What I'd recommend is every morning do some form of prayer and meditation. Invite God into your day, invite God into your disease, and don't ask Him for recovery for the rest of your life. You are wasting your time and God's. He could grant that, but you're kind of wasting your time. Ask Him for 24 hours, or ask Him for the next 3 hours, or ask Him for the next hour. God, give me 1 hour of abstinence. At the end of that hour, ask Him again. Ask Him again. Break it down into, the AA program talks about living one day at a time. 24 hours. That's all you have to do in recovery, just this 24 hours. Break it down. You might not can do it 24. Do it, like I said, 3 or 4 hours. And then recommit, and then recommit. Before my husband sobered up, God watches after animals and children and fools, and I think we kind of came under the category of fools. But he was still drinking, but we had a big old house, and in the back was this big playroom it was like an apartment. It had a loft with sleeping quarters. It had its own kitchen, its own bathroom, and all that. Somehow, and I think it was probably my codependency, I agreed to let the AAs bring people out to the house to sober them up. Keep in mind, my husband was still drinking Never mind that. We were going to have these other drinks, and my husband would go out and talk to them, go out to the playroom and shoot the breeze and shoot pool with them, But we would bring them in and detox them. And I wouldn't. The AAs would come and stay around the clock. That was way before detox units. And sometimes I wish we could go back to the old way, because I don't know of a one of those that sobered up in that back room that didn't stay clean and sober, because it was the hands-on from those other addicts. So anyway, it is about getting with like kind that would help you. And anyway, getting back to the spiritual, I'm just skipping around here. The spiritual. Spend some time of a morning, and that's what I was going to say. These guys would introduce, and it was mostly men that they detoxed back there in the playroom, and they would do just one at a time. I'd take them food back there or whatever, and I'd go back, and they would be circled up, and there might be 3 or 4 of them, but they'd have the drunk there sitting up in a chair. They wouldn't let him lay down a whole lot, make him sit up, and they would be having a meeting, in there, and they would have, prayer time. I mean, these guys took this serious, and what it did to those guys, it gave them another day of recovery. They would take time off of their jobs to go do this, to help sober someone up. So on the spiritual aspect, it is a spiritual problem in that we make the substance the God of our understanding. So it makes sense, in order to recover, we must find a God of our understanding. One of the things that I have found helpful too, that's my last, but I'll do that in a minute. One of the things that, like these guys they would sober up back there in the playroom, it wouldn't be any time till the guys that had worked with them would be taking him on what they call 12-step calls, or they would bring in a new drunk and they would sober him up back in the playroom. Well, they would bring that guy in, so immediately they started giving away what was given to them. I hear people saying, oh, you can't work with others till you've had a year of recovery. You can't work with others till you have 6 months. You can't work with others till you finish the steps. That is absolutely BS. There would not be an Alcoholics Anonymous if those early people had not started working with each other. Bill W. had one day when he started going out and finding drugs to help, So, what I'm saying is, when you're in a 12-step program and you're new, if you have a good sponsor, they're going to bring other people in for you to talk with. They may bring a newcomer in for you to talk with. That is doing 12-step work. And so that is one of the best things that you can do, is like service work. Give it back. Give back what was freely given to you. And you can't give something that you don't have. If you don't have it, you can't give it away. And if you don't know what it is, you don't have it. You don't have it. If you don't know what it is, and I see some old timers grinning, if you don't know what recovery is, you don't have it. So don't try to give it away. You don't have it. You need to receive. You're in the receiving position. And when you're receiving from a sponsor, what you're doing is you're giving them another day of recovery. That's the best gift that you can give a sponsor, is pick up that phone and call them. Okay, so service work. Get in there and, clean up the room, do whatever you need to do to get out of yourself. That's the whole thing. And when you're doing something for someone else, it breaks that mental obsession. Helping others gives you purpose. And so then there's another thing that I want to talk about, is is most addicts, I don't guess I've ever worked with an addict that came in that said, I just love myself. I just am in love with myself. Now, we've worked with a lot of self-centered addicts. They act like they love themselves. Self-centeredness, I mean, they put themselves way up here on a pedestal. They're the hardest to work with. I'd rather for them to be down in the gutter and help them come up. But you have to pull them off of that pedestal, when they put themselves up there. But the thing, I've lost my train of thought. Anyway, one of the things is when you really get down to any addiction, whether it's eating disorders, alcoholism, drug addiction, there is a lot of self-condemnation. There is a lot of self-hatred. Any of you addicts on here ever hated yourself? Shake your head if you've ever disliked yourself. Maybe you don't want to hear the word hate, but I hated my own guts. I could hardly look in the mirror every morning to comb my hair because I'd have to look at myself. I hated myself. So one of the best things that we recommend, and I'll tell you, I've worked it, it works. And people, roll their eyes sometimes at this. What we recommend is to write down 50 short affirmations. And I'm getting ready to speak up at Virginia for a workshop with wrestlers, with coaches, parents, kids, going up there Friday to do that. It's kind of a big deal. And I'm going to teach them about affirmations. Because so many people, and a lot of your athletes, unless they are the star, unless they're really doing good, they get so mad at themselves. So affirmation is about writing down 50 short, positive affirmations. You don't even have to believe it. Just put it down. I'm lovable, I am kind, I am generous, I'm pretty, I'm beautiful, I'm whole, I'm loving, Keep it very short, nothing negative at all, not one negative word in those 50 affirmations. Now, if you'll do that, write them down, and then 5 times a day, look in the mirror and read those 50 affirmations to yourself, looking at the dark part of your eye. Do that 5 times a day for 2 weeks. And I will tell you, if you do that, let me know, because our brain is the most magnificent computer that's ever been made, and God made that computer. And if you want to change your thinking, this is one of the ways to do it. I'm going to show you what I did. And this is probably 35 years old, this little compact. I don't recommend the guys doing this. I don't know, maybe you want to. But anyway, I took the powder out of this compact. Y'all see it? And here are the original affirmations. It's yellow and it's almost torn up. But this is the original 50 affirmations that I wrote down. So both sides. So what I would do is I would fold it up and put it in this little compact. And regardless, and I was working full-time at the, of course, treatment center. And so sometimes I would just run in the bathroom, or I'd run outside. I'd have this in my pocket. And after a while, those affirmations are going to become a working part of the mind. But for the first 2 weeks, you're probably going to have to read them. But regardless of where I was at, like I'd be sitting in a doctor's office with one of the kids sick or something, and I just pull that out and look in that mirror and read these off. People didn't know what I was doing. I mean, they didn't care anyway. But if you do that 5 times a day for 2 weeks, something's going to change about your brain. And I've gotten some people to do that, and when they take that challenge, it's amazing what happens to them. And then if they don't take it, they never know if it will help or not. you know, they'll eye roll or think that is so silly. And why 5 times? Why not 1 time? Why not 2 times? Do it 5 times a day, looking in the mirror, and it won't take you any time to do it. And in the end of 2 weeks, this will become a working part of your mind and body. I promise you that. So I really would encourage you to make your own list. I mean, bless my heart. I was so sick when I wrote this. I wrote this after I had gone to a trauma unit. Well, that's probably been closer to 40 years. That's how long is it? I'm loving, I'm lovable, I'm creative, I'm passionate, and I didn't believe any of that. None. But you write it down whether you believe it or not, and then you fold it up, and I would just put it right in there and close that, and I'd carry it around with me. Anyway, so that's your lesson on affirmations. That's a tool. Affirmations is a tool, and it will shift the mind completely. And then another tool is some may need professional help. And another thing is remember that recovery is a daily act of love. If you really and truly love yourself, you're going to recover. And most of us get to the program, or we get to the realization that we have a disease and we have a lot of self-hatred about it. We don't like ourselves. And so one of the things, and I've told this before, we worked with a group of Russians for a week, did codependency work with them. And at the end of it, one of these women, she spoke a little English, and what she said, I'll never forget it. She said, what, and they'd been over here a year going to different treatment centers to learn how to treat alcoholics. And they came to my friend and I, and we were teaching them about codependency. And what she said was, through that 6-day program, what she had found, she had taken a liking to herself. And that's what I hope each of you will do, is through your recovery will take a liking to yourself, for yourself. Because if you don't love yourself, you're not going to recover. You're not going to do the things that you need to do to recover. And recovery is a daily act of love. And what I would recommend for an assignment for today or tomorrow is write a love letter to yourself. Write a love letter to yourself. What I would recommend is write the first one, a love letter to yourself, with your non-dominant hand. That will be the child part of you writing the letter to the adults. Are you with me? Non-dominant hand, write a love letter to your adult. Turn it over on the back with your hand that, your regular hand that you write with. The adult in you, write a love letter to your inner child. So it's 2 love letters. The inner child's writing the adult a love letter, and the adult is writing a love letter to the inner child. And when you do inner child work, what happened to me is, and it didn't happen overnight, and I don't do it perfect, and I still don't, is I tried to quit beating myself up so much. You know, why would you beat up a kid? And that's where I would have to see myself as that inner child. So, if you can leave today with just one tool, I feel kind of like I've been scattered. I've been giving you so many illustrations, and I, talk too much about one. But anyway, I'm not going to get down on myself. But if you're an old timer, and sometimes old timers are overlooked in meetings, and which is kind of sad, because there's old timers that have had 25, 30 years that have relapsed. And so an old timer, if you're an old timer in the program, dust off your tools and go back to using them. Dust them off and go back to using them, because sometimes we kind of take it for granted. Well, I've already done that. I've done that. I've done that. They never get old. These tools that I've mentioned, prayer, meditation, working the steps with the sponsor, going to meetings, and reading some form of program literature every day. And then the fifth thing is give it away. Give it away. You do those 5 things every day and you're going to recover. If you've quit doing those 5 things, you might dust those tools off and start doing those 5 things again. But remember, before you work any tool, you've got to be sober around the substance. So that's what I have. I guess I'm out of time. But is there anyone that has a comment or question? Neil, have you ever used this? Do you use these tools?